Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paula Glover, President of Alliance to Save Energy.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And thank you for sticking with us this entire day. Welcome to our session, Building Back Better Starts with Buildings. And we have a great panel that I'd love to bring out on stage with me. Mr. John Kovac, Vice President of Energy and Performance Services for Siemens Americas. Mr. Alan Steele, President and CEO of the Javits Center, and Ms. Sarah Salati, Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer for the New York Power Authority. Please take a seat, join me. So today we are going to talk about buildings, but first what I want to share with the audience is just a little bit about each of your backgrounds, because you've given us your time. And you have a lot to share, and I think it's important that we know a little bit about who you are. And I'll start with Mr. Steele. Mr. Steele is, again, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the New York Convention Center Operating Corporation, which operates where we are today, the Javits Center. So thank you so much for hosting us here.
Thank you.
And under his leadership, the Javits Center has launched an historic expansion project. Upon his appointment in 2012, Mr. Steele led the completion of a comprehensive renovation and operational overhaul that included significant investments in energy efficiency, security, and technology. He currently serves on the board of directors for New York City Audubon, New Yorkers for Parks, and on the board of the Climate Museum. Alan Steele.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for coming, and we're delighted to welcome you to the Javits Center, our newly expanded Javits Center and newly sustainable Javits Center. We've worked very hard to try and make sustainability a big part of our message. We intend it to continue to be a big part of our message, and I hope when you have a chance to come to the reception afterwards, you get a chance to see a new green roof and the jewel in our crown right now, the new farm, which we're busy planting out right now. So I look forward to talking to you later.
Thank you so much. Mr. John Kovac, Head of Energy and Performance Services Americas for Siemens, and I will tell you, lover of collard greens, because we've been talking about food for the last 25 minutes. John leads the Energy and Performance Services business for Siemens Smart Infrastructure in the Americas region, helping a wide range of customers realize the benefits of the global energy transition, including governments and municipalities, hospitals, education, and commercial and industrial companies. John's expertise lies in providing integrated sustainable solutions with leading technologies and helping organizations take advantage of the intersection of renewables, energy management strategies, and IoT at the grid edge. The organization he leads focuses on the total life cycle of building energy usage, helping customers achieve sustainability and performance targets from supply to demand. John Kovac.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's a pleasure to be here, and we've been working with Javits for a long time, and we have a shared values with innovation, technology, sustainability. So couldn't think of a better place to come and talk.
Thank you so much for taking time. And Sarah Orbancelotti serves as the Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer for the New York Power Authority, NYPA. She is responsible for managing the wholesale and retail commercial operations, including oversight of $2 billion in annual revenues from NYPA's power generating assets through wholesale energy trading and contracting. Sarah also leads NYPA's integrated customer solutions comprised of customer-sided distributed energy resource advisory services, turnkey energy efficiency project implementation, digital building energy management services, and electric vehicle charging infrastructure implementation, amongst others. Sarah has also led NYPA's grid-scale business development team focused on bulk transmission and storage projects. Additionally, Sarah is the executive sponsor of Women in Power, the employee resource group, the first ERG at NYPA, and on the board of directors for the Energy Storage Association. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks very much. I was just reflecting on the fact with Alan that I was here 1 year ago today for Climate Week, touring with then Lieutenant Governor Hochul, but now Governor Hochul. And it's great to see the finishing touches because when I was last here, it was a cavernous construction site, and now it's a beautiful convention center. So very happy to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So let's get to it. Alan, we are going to start with you as a native New Yorker. I remember the old Javits Center, and I will tell you, you've done a phenomenal job. It is really, when you come down 12th Avenue to West Side Highway, it's a beautiful, beautiful building. I wondered if you could share a little bit with us about the sustainability journey that you've been on and the why it was so important to you to take on this project, to improve this building, why was integrating technology and efficiency important, as well as your green roof, the farm. Tell us a little bit about what you were thinking, what inspired you to do this work, and then hopefully others will learn from that and do the same.
Well, the reality is that the green roof, which is one of the things that people talk most about when we talk about the Javits Center Sustainability Program, I actually inherited that. That was not something that I did. It was something that when I came here in 2012, I was already in the execution. The credit for that really goes to Bruce Fowle from FX Fowle and Company, who I'd like to tell you that the board authorized everything that he did. The board planned to spend the money they needed to spend to build a green roof, but I'd be lying. Bruce just kind of put the plans together, built the green roof, and everyone said at the time, that's great, but what does it mean? The thing that I was fortunate about, I came here, walked onto the green roof and said, this is an asset. This is really a valuable asset that we can use to talk about the story of the Javits Center, because many people had a negative image of Javits for many reasons. And we used that to begin to talk about the value of sustainability and the value of the building in a sustainable role. And what I found was the more we talked about it, the more we had to do. So we got into this spiral where it wasn't just talking about sustainability, it was actually doing things. And people coming here and asking us, what have you done and what will you do? And every conversation we had led us to another level of discussion. So I'm not saying that we were forced into this, but it was certainly something that circumstances around us created the opportunity. And at the same time, many of our customers were beginning to go onto the sustainability journey themselves. The event business was beginning to examine its own role in carbon footprint creation. And so we were just in the right place at the right time. We took advantage of it, and we've continued to do that, which is why, as we've finished some of the other projects that we've done, and we've looked to the future, that's why we're now engaged in the whole concept of adding solar power to the building as well, because we can have a green roof, we can have a farm, and we can have a solar roof at the same time. And next comes wind. I have to look for some wind power somewhere.
Some wind power. So, John, I think you and I would agree that what makes part of what's going on here at the Javits Center unique is that you took on this project, Alan, with an existing building. You did not decide to knock the Javits Center down and then start from the beginning. And so, John, I wondered if you could spend a few moments and tell us why that's important and why that's really important in this particular conversation around climate change, and the role that improving our buildings can have. And then talk a little bit about what kind of policies do we need to see to replicate this kind of work around the country.
Yeah, thanks. You know, as far as the installation that we have and where we're putting solar on the roof, canopies to an existing building. So there's a lot of things to take into account with a brownfield facility. But the impact that making those changes on brownfield facilities have, or existing facilities, is it can have such a bigger impact on the city than the time it takes for new construction. You know, utilizing energy efficiency in existing facilities with improvement measures to reduce the energy that people consume, and even now producing clean energy that those facilities can use to either feed back into the grid or consume themselves. Right? So it can have a tremendous impact. I think if I think it was like if 70% of the buildings did what Javits did, it would have a tremendous impact on climate change. Like I think it was like 10% reduction overall or something. It's an amazing number.
Sure.
So.
And so as you think about that, I'll follow up. Any particular policies? We've got the president who was across town earlier today.
Right.
We've got COP coming up in just another month, 6 weeks or so.
Right.
What kind of advice would you give if you got to be at the General Assembly?
Yeah.
What would you tell them about what they should be thinking about as it relates to buildings and climate?
I think allowing people to participate in the market, energy market. I mean, you already see that some with demand response here, where when there's peak power requirements, it's extremely expensive to produce, or you're running diesels to meet the power requirements of a facility or other areas of the city, that people can invest in solar, invest in batteries, and feed that back into the grid in order to reduce that both fossil output and to improve the economics. So that's one of the things I think is makes a huge difference, is the ability to participate in the market.
So Sarah, let me ask you a question. You know, New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is leading in many states in setting climate targets and developing plans to achieve them, including investment in zero emission electricity by 2030. So how does what's gone on here at the Javits Center support those goals? And then how do you think about this work at NYPA, where you have a whole host of customers and a lot of activities that you're doing to meet not only just New York State's goals, but the goals that your own leadership has kind of put forth?
Yeah, well, thanks. It's been really exciting working on the Javits Center Solar Rooftop with Alan and Siemens. I think it's a great example of public-private partnerships in terms of moving forward and setting very strong examples for the industry to follow. That's one of the reasons I love working at NYPA. I really feel that we lead by example. You're right, New York State has set very bold goals and ambitions. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is law. It's not an executive order. It was passed by the legislature. And so we're looking at incorporating 9 gigawatts of offshore wind, 6 gigawatts of distributed energy resources, of which this project counts, and 3 gigawatts of storage, all in an attempt to get to carbon neutral by 2040. So NYPA feels very responsible to help execute on that vision. We've worked very closely with our customers. The Javits Center is just one example of that. Another couple that I could point to is JFK, where we're putting 13 megawatts of solar with storage technology supporting the port, as well as supporting the local community. Also working on across New York City, several solar plus storage projects as well at 47 schools across 5 boroughs, as well as with the Department of Environmental Protection and Wastewater Treatment Plants. So to me, when I think about the Javits Center and the project that was done here, it's unique. It's the largest solar rooftop in the world, and I think that, again, what we can do as both the public and private sectors bring the best minds and the best technologies together and find solutions that are supporting the clean energy transition.
So I'm going to follow up a little bit with you as well, right? So I was introduced, I work for an organization called the Alliance to Save Energy. So I'm all about energy efficiency and technology. And so we describe that at the Alliance as active efficiency, that intersection of technology and efficiency, that digitization of what's going on. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how technology is helping to shape this story and how we are responding to climate specifically in our buildings. Because I would suggest that oftentimes people don't think that technology and buildings kind of go together in terms of a climate solution. And so could you share a little bit about what you're seeing over at NYPA and how digitization is moving us forward?
Sure. I mean, it builds off of what John was saying, right? When we talk about active efficiency, we're thinking of 3 components, moving from static to dynamic, from component to system, and then ultimately looking at the holistic benefits, not just getting energy savings, cost savings, but ultimately the environmental benefits, which is why we're moving towards the clean energy future that we are. So really where I see active efficiency taking root is around digital technology and the overlay of the digital technology to help orchestrate all of these technologies, these assets. And so the buildings in and of themselves are one thing. We have at NYPA, as you heard in your intro, New York Energy Manager, which essentially is sub-metering and integrating into the BMS systems to help optimize the energy consumption within our customers. But really, we're looking towards aggregating the solar plus storage, such as the project we're doing here, the buildings that we have with other customers and projects with other customers, and ultimately bringing them together to participate in a virtual power plant, which is going again back to what John was talking about, where we can reduce the amount of supply side renewables that we're going to need by creating greater flexibility on the demand side, and ultimately, going back to your question about regulatory frameworks, being able to see us participate in markets where it will help pull these technologies in even more, because the customers will see the benefit on the savings side, but also potentially revenue generation. So it's an exciting time. The technology is there. Really, it's the markets that need to continue to develop.
Just to add a little to that, I mean, I think you have to realize that the original Javits Center was built in 1986. And so the technology that existed in 1986 and the technology that exists today are obviously very, very different. I joke that when I first came to put events into the building here, the only way you could change the temperature was to send an engineer on the roof and have him kick one of the air conditioning units. But that wasn't too far from the truth. Now we have a fully controlled system. We have a BMS that manages all of our temperature controls down to a very small area, and really has improved our efficiency immensely. Since we engaged in this project, we've reduced our energy costs by about 26% through a variety of different technologies. But those technologies weren't available when the building was built. This building, this expansion, was fully equipped with all of those things from the beginning.
Awesome. So we're going to pick up on where you left off, Alan, and John, I'm going to ask you a question. Yep. You know, you've been partnering at Siemens with Javits for more than 20 years, and energy efficiency practices have been at that core. So talk a little bit about that evolution of traditional efficiency, insulation, windows, doors, the things that people may be more familiar with, to now how we're talking about digital technologies. What's required to take that step and move forward? What are those immediate benefits in terms of emissions and costs? And then I'm going to ask you also to talk about any challenges that you may think that there may exist in getting this done.
Okay. You know, I just wanted to, actually that builds off of what both Sarah and Alan were talking about with the systems that we have and the dashboards that we have now, and the understanding digitally what's going on is the ability to do predictive maintenance and predictive service to address issues before they become critical, right? And that can have a major impact on the performance of a building. And I was at a big university system last week, and one of the things they were talking about is they had done LEED certification for a number of their buildings, but when they went back and checked how it was performing, it definitely wasn't performing to that level. And there's a struggle first you have to get LEED certification when you build a building or renovate a building, but maintaining that efficiency so that it pays off the way that you think it will be, both from a climate, sustainability, and economic way. It really takes a long-term life cycle approach, putting in the digital systems. I mean, they can monitor with a cutting-edge dashboard everything that's going on in the facility, and use technology to make sure that you're running your equipment extremely efficiently. So, and you had the second part of the question, which I forgot.
Any challenges?
Sure.
Seeing how we...
Yeah, sure.
Right.
You know, sometimes it's legacy equipment can be a challenge,
okay.
Right? Getting the data in so that you can integrate the system. I mean, when you're integrating a number of different products, manufacturers, systems that go back for decades in some cases, getting your arms around that can be a challenge. But that's part of it. Part of it is also making sure that you have the ability to respond quickly, have the processes in place at the building to use that information to better manage the facility. So it's really making sure that you get the data, and more importantly, training on how you're going to use that data, rather than just this alert and somebody responds to it, but to use it to actively manage your building.
Sure. Thank you so much. Sarah and Alan, you both talked a little bit about the rooftop solar that's going to be installed here, but I'm going to start with you, Sarah, and wondered if you could share with us what NYPA is doing to accelerate the adoption of rooftop solar throughout New York.
Well, it builds a little bit on what I was saying before. I think that, again, New York State has set very bold goals as part of the law, and NYPA is working with its customer base, the largest state agencies, local governments across the state, and we are doing, through our Clean Energy Advisory Services, which supported this project, scoping, making a technical assessment on the ability to do these projects. And I think when I look at, when I joined NYPA 3 years ago to where we are today, we had about 2 megawatts in our pipeline, and now we have over 350 megawatts in our pipeline. So this is at the distributed level across, as I mentioned, various geographies in the state. So to me, it's encouraging. We're at a sustainability conference. It's Climate Week. We have all of our customers and our major stakeholders are interested. They want to sign up. They want to find out how they can put solar plus storage on their rooftops, both to support renewable generation, and also they're thinking about resiliency. So that is really it. And where I would say the kind of next frontier that I'm hearing a lot from our customer base is really around the electrification of the transport industry, right? And so ultimately, that is the next, I think, asset class that we're going to be integrating into this ecosystem of technologies that ultimately will be dynamic and support the active efficiency that we're talking about.
So I have a follow-up for you as well. And for people who work in the energy industry, as I have for many decades, there's a saying that's always, where goes California, thereby goes the rest of the country. But I would suggest, where goes New York, there goes by the rest of the country. So for other states that are looking at what's happening in New York, do you have any advice for them, things that they should be thinking about?
Okay, well, I worked in New York 6 years out of college, then I wasn't from New York, but I'm back from New York now for 3 years. So, okay, so I would say, it's funny, I was on a panel yesterday and I was talking about New York and everybody kept bringing up California, so I appreciate you bringing up New York. I think what's great is that, again, and it's both California and New York, you have the Cal ISO and you have the New York Independent System Operator, and when you have an individual state regional transmission operator, that really helps move things along, because if you get the commitment at the executive governor's level, as well as with the legislature and with the local politicians, you can really move. And I think that that's what we've seen in New York in terms of the level of alignment in wanting to move things forward. And again, passing the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act into law is a perfect example of that. Where I see a lot of opportunity and what I'm excited about is the harmonization between the federal level and the state level when it comes to some of the incentives that are going to be, hopefully we'll be able to avail ourselves of as a state and as well as municipalities relative to some of the stimulus packages. A lot of money, I think, will be put into obviously supporting transmission, right? And we just had an announcement today. NYPA was selected for one of the 2 transmission projects that will be feeding hydro and renewables into New York City. But again, in the electric vehicle areas, and with energy storage with some of the investment tax credits. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity, as I said, between the federal and the state, and looking forward to seeing what comes out of it and getting some money into the Big Apple.
Awesome, awesome. Alan, so at the end of the day, a building like the Javits Center has a use, right? It's an event space. People come here to use it for something. And so talk a little bit about how this integration of your rooftop solar, digital technologies, distributed generation, how does that change the experience of people who are organizing events in this space? Does it create new business models? Are people starting to ask different types of questions? That sort of thing. And so that we can understand like how marketing a building like this can really help a business as opposed to an older facility, for example.
Well, I think it was referenced in a couple of earlier sessions. The reality is that the level of interest in sustainability as a topic has increased exponentially over the last several years. The events industry clearly is a travel business. It clearly has a fairly significant carbon footprint. But event producers are becoming much more aware of that, much more concerned about it, and much more interested in what we as a facility and they as an event organizer can do to help offset. So the whole discussion has moved along a lot. We're able to talk to people now about our sustainable practices, and they see that as an asset in selling their customers on coming to a city like New York and coming to a building like Javits. So when I first started looking at sustainability, the concern was what was it going to cost? That fairly quickly changed, partly because of demand response programs, which showed us that it was possible to actually save quite a bit of money by being part of those programs. But it also became very clear that we were able to have a different conversation with our customers. Customers who had been hesitant about coming to the building before suddenly had a story to talk about. They could talk about the second largest green roof in the country and the 35 bird species and the jars of honey we would give them from our beehives. It became a very different conversation. It changed the nature of our discussion. And I think for us, it's become part of our sales message. It's become part of a whole story that we tell when our customers come in, and they're all very welcoming of that message right now.
John, your company works with a lot of companies in a lot of sectors in this economy. What are some of the obstacles that your customers are experiencing as we push towards this net zero carbon? And what are some ways that your organization sees that we can push past challenges to accelerate the adoption?
Yeah, I think the policies are different state by state, right? So I think that's a big part of it. Is will you get the sponsorship by the state that they want to pursue it? That's a big part. Number two is really firstly, if it doesn't make economic sense, it's hard for a lot of these organizations to proceed forward. Now, with what's happened with cost on solar panel and battery storage now, it's really getting to be an advantage, particularly if you have some of the ITC, investment tax credits, or your ability to participate in the market. It can really make a difference. So that's a big part of it. Part of it is just putting a program together to systematically go through your, whether it's, say, a public university or your campus. There's usually so much work to do. It starts with just assessing it and getting a plan so that you can make the biggest gains as quickly as possible, make sure it cash flows, and then continue throughout the facility. All right, that's a big part of it. And getting buy-in from board of trustees and making sure that you're selling that change. It won't be disruptive to the day-to-day operation of the business, which is always probably the major concern. I think that's a big part of it. So, actually, I was going to ask a question. You both mentioned you mentioned earlier using the building for sustainability and companies being interested in that. One of the things that was really interesting to me here is that you're able to tell a convention how much energy they're consuming and their impact from an energy usage perspective, so they can start being cognizant of that and working to reduce that. I thought that was really
yeah, it's actually, we haven't implemented this, but we've had discussions about it. We're now in a position where, because when we rent a building, we rent it including electricity, we could begin to pull electricity out and offer the event producer the opportunity to rent the building without electricity, but pay for the electricity separately, and therefore give them an incentive to use less or to be more effective in what they do. We've never had that before, but that's an opportunity for us to actually change our pricing model a little bit. I'm not sure all of our customers like the idea of being charged for electricity, but for us it is an opportunity to look at the business a little differently that we didn't even think of when we got into this process.
So you're not going to mark up for the solar?
No, we're not going to mark up. No, I don't think that's going to be allowed. So.
No, I mean, just to add on, with NYPA's New York Energy Manager, one of the aspects of that is the ability to baseline GHG emissions coming from our customers' buildings and assets, and ultimately set targets. And going back to the digital, using the predictive analytics based on historicals, as well as other factors to help better target the reductions that could be achieved relative to some of the additional energy efficiency measures or other technologies that can be added. So again, you manage what you measure, and with the data and the ability to disaggregate, it's a brave new world.
So And I'm going to we're going to take a couple questions if people are interested, but I'm going to ask you guys a couple more questions. We're going to shift topics a little bit. The session right before ours was a great discussion about gender equity and climate. And a couple of weeks ago, the Alliance, in partnership with several other organizations, released the Diversity and Clean Energy Report. And one of the sad things cited in that report, I will say, is that we as a clean energy sector are just not diverse. We as an energy sector are not diverse, so maybe that's good news, bad news, good news, worse news. But what that report cited is that while African Americans make up 13% of our workforce, they make up 8% of the clean energy workforce. While women make up 48% of our workforce, they only make up 28% of our clean energy workforce. And Hispanics are a little bit closer. They make up 19% of our total workforce and 16% of our clean energy workforce. So there is a lot that we can do to improve that. Alan, projects like these and these kinds of investments help position Javits for the future to make you more competitive, but also to help with economic vitality for the city. Talk about a little bit about how you see your role in economic development for the city of New York, and how you think about these kind of diversity issues as you're building out your team and bringing people in the city.
Well, tackling the diversity question first, I mean, in my private business, before I came to Javits, we were very committed to the concept of diversity within our executive team. And I've followed that same practice here. We've looked to try and spread the wealth and to import the brain power that comes from a diverse population. We've always got more to do, but I think that I really enjoy working with women in our leadership group. Men tend to get a little macho about things. The women we work with tend to be much more aimed at solutions and not necessarily posturing. So we kind of work together to try and achieve those things. I think it's been a great benefit for us, and we'll continue to try and expand it. From a customer perspective, the industry is still led, the events industry is still led primarily by men, but there are a lot of senior women leaders in the industry now. I like what Governor Hochul said this morning. She said, the fact is that mankind is responsible for the mess that we're in, and womankind is going to have to come in and sort it out. So I think that I'm a big believer in having as broad and diverse a population in our leadership as possible.
Thank you. Sarah, so let me ask you a question. And I know that NYPA is doing a lot of work around equity, but is there an opportunity now to talk about equity and economic investment? Are those two things, can they be tied together as we think about achieving our sustainability goals?
No, absolutely. Again, going back to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, 30% of the benefits are meant to go towards historically disadvantaged communities or environmental justice communities, and so that is a big focus area for us. Fortunately, we work in congested urban areas, which include LMI communities. We work with NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, for example, and have done a lot of energy efficiency work there and more to come, hopefully. That being said, I see it in two ways. One is that when we're putting solar and storage on top of a building in the middle of a congested city, you ultimately are supporting the reduction of, hopefully, fossil fuel plants running in the same vicinity, with the two transmission projects that will be bringing renewables directly into Zone J, which is New York City. That should help accelerate the closure of and the transition away from fossil fuels. But ultimately, when you do that, you're supporting and improving the environment for the individuals that are living in that area. So NYPA is very committed and focuses projects expressly for that purpose. Additionally, in the support of the electrification of the transport industry and working with the major transit agencies, the MTA and others across the state, we also are looking at reducing the emissions along the major transport corridors, and those buses are typically used again by historically disadvantaged and LMI communities. So those are two ways. But the third thing I would say is that again, there's so much work to be done in this clean energy transition, and so much to be done on the building side, right, relative to what we're talking about in the project we're talking about today, particularly with the existing building stock and the retrofitting of that, and including making it smarter, et cetera, with digital technology. There's an incredible number of jobs that are associated with that. And so where I see a lot of potential, again, for economic development for the livelihoods of the people that live in New York City, New York State, are individuals that are going to be contributing and earning a living in that transition, and improving ultimately the communities in which they also are living and not just working.
So this is a great opportunity for follow-up for you, John. Talk a little bit about what Siemens is doing to prepare the next generation of graduates for careers in facilities like Javits, or for careers at Siemens.
Yeah.
Talk about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we invest a tremendous amount in STEAM programs. I mean, one of our largest markets, at least for my business, is K through 12. And we often partner with those school systems to provide STEAM programs to create really like living labs. So we'll do work on a facility, do facility improvement measures, and then we can teach the students, this is how you reduce energy, this is why it's important, get them excited about, you know, engineering and math and this technology. I mean, we're a technology company, and we use a lot of the projects that we do as opportunities to educate both the K through 12 level, but also at the university level, where we can make, well, I mean, one of our clients calls it collaboratory, right? Where you can see the actual impact of this chiller. When we alter this is what happens to the system. You can go out and look at the system, see the impact on the facility. And so we invest quite a bit in those programs across the K through 12 all the way into the collegiate level, because really if we want to expand out and diversify this industry, you have to start from getting people excited when they're younger about these topics,
Sure.
right? And so we make a lot of investments to do that.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have a little bit over 8 minutes. I wonder if there are any questions from anyone else. Sure, sir.
Yes. My name is Juan Blanco. I work with an energy company in Houston. We use an energy system that's adapted from NASA systems for rockets. And I have a few questions for the audience, the panel. Does the Javits Center produce enough electricity for its own needs? Does it produce enough electricity to sell to the grid?
We will be producing, when we have a full solar installation, probably about 10% of our overall need. So we will not be able to produce enough power to support the entire building. And you remember, when we have no events in the building, we have a very low demand. When we have the New York International Auto Show, we have a very high demand. So our demand kind of flows up and down. But I think overall, we think about 10% will be compensated for by solar.
Would you be interested in a system that would produce 10 times that amount of electricity?
I'm always interested in anything that does anything more efficiently. Yeah.
I'd like to speak with you afterwards.
Sure.
And I have a question for the lady from NYPA. New York just saw a terrible storm that came out, and this is something that's going to become the everyday fare of climate change. And of course, we still have the memory of the hurricane that hit New York a few years ago. All of this points to the need to have a system of microgrid energy centers. Is that what's behind the notion of installing energy systems in New York City schools? They would be perfect centers for a microgrid.
Yeah, no, I would say that, you know, NYPA runs a third of the transmission network in New York State and provides 25% of the energy. So we think about resiliency and reliability every single day, every moment of the day. So when we think about implementing distributed energy resources, it's also with the idea that you have a distributed grid, and that can support the resiliency of the system. So, I mean, I guess the answer ultimately is yes. In the end, with the technology cost curves coming down, you know, batteries are being considered as resiliency and backups for major manufacturing or otherwise organizations. And so yes is my long, short answer.
Yeah. Last question for all of you. Everyone views electric cars as the solution. It's a panacea, because they're only as clean as where the energy is produced. And is there a system for directing clean electrical energy that produced by non-coal-fired factories, emissions places for electric cars in New York? Is that part of the grid that's being created for the electric car network? And is there a thought to retrofitting existing petroleum-based vehicles to operate on hydrogen, for instance, which is being talked about a lot?
Yeah, so clearly we have the goal of getting to 100% renewable grid by 2040, and that's why I'm so adamant and focused on reducing the amount and being as efficient as we can with our energy use on the demand side, because clearly as you electrify heating and cooling and transport to move off of gas and oil, right, boilers, you ultimately are going to drive up the electricity demand. We are at NYPA actually doing a hydrogen pilot because we've committed to move our fossil fuel plants off of fossil fuel by 2035. And so we're hoping that green hydrogen and some of those other technologies, breakthrough technologies that don't even exist yet, will help support to support that. But it is ultimately a challenge. And fortunately, the energy sector is very exciting to be in now, and a lot of great minds are focused on it.
Any other questions? And I cannot see. It doesn't look like it.
No. Everyone wants to get a drink.
Well, listen, we're not going to stop them. So what I'm going to do is we have a few minutes left, but I'm going to ask each of you one last question, a question that you did not get ahead of time. So you kind of have to think on your feet. But it should be a softball. And I'll start with you, Alan, and it is this. What's next for Javits? What's on the horizon in terms of your sustainability plans?
A glass of Chardonnay isn't for my well, I think that the successful completion of our solar projects, the effective use of our new battery storage system and our new microgrid, all of those things, it's great to have them, but we also have to learn how to use them effectively. So I think one of our next challenges is just to make sure that all of these tools we now have are being used to the maximum efficiency. What comes beyond that? I do like the idea of small wind. I like the idea of trying it. We've done some testing on it. I'm not sure it will work for us, but we're a community asset. We should not just be a convention center. So if we can be a test bed for other forms of energy saving, I'd love to be volunteer and be used for that.
Awesome, thank you. And Sarah and John, a little twist on the same question, which is not just what's next, but for all of us in the audience, what should we be doing and thinking about as we want to move? We're here for Climate Week, so clearly you have an audience of people who are supportive of us tackling this challenge. What are the things that we should be thinking about, even in our own individual homes and communities?
Would you like to go first?
You may go first.
Sure, it doesn't matter.
Sure, yeah, it doesn't matter. I think, well, first of all, if we're here, we're probably in the energy industry, and I think just making sure to promote these technologies that can really make these reductions and make a big impact. As far as home, I think that's to talk with your local and state government and your representatives to try to drive policies to drive adoption of these technologies that are going to lower our carbon footprint. I think that's what I would focus on. But as far as being in the industry and what we can do is to continue to go after these projects and look for opportunities to reduce not just supply clean energy, but also reduce what we consume of that energy. So that's mine.
Okay, so what can we do? Well, I mean, the reality is it's a grand challenge, right? People think that sustainability, climate change is the existential threat of the 21st century. You can agree with that or not, but that being said, it's still a challenge. So in my mind, there's no silver bullet. And ultimately, at this summit today, there are individuals in the audience, and everybody is bringing their own expertise to bear in thinking through the problem. So to me, it's about all of us working together together in the capacity that we can to advance it. In terms of at home, well, I was really encouraged because my daughter recognized a recycling sign before she recognized a stop sign. So I think that, frankly, the schools are doing a pretty good job of inculcating, you know, our children with the idea of supporting the environment. So once my son no longer says glitter for litter, we're going to be golden.
Great, thank you so much. Any final comments or thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, the one thing I would just say, and I think everyone may have heard this, but one of our signature achievements and one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that Javits, before our renovation, we were the biggest killer of birds in New York City. We used to kill about 4,000 birds a year, and we reduced that by 95% as a result of installing bird-friendly glass. So being on the board of New York City Audubon, I implore you all to change your glass and put bird-friendly glass into any building that you're building or anything you're retrofitting. It will certainly please the birds, and it will please the New York City Audubon Society.
Thank you. And so with just 13 seconds left, what I will invite all of you to do is not only follow these great panelists, but please follow us at the Alliance, www.asc.org, if you're interested in our federal advocacy work around efficiency. And I thank you all for your time.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.